If you reach 40 years old with a normal job, and you're not at least a millionaire, there's a very high chance it wasn't because you didn't work hard. It's because no one ever told you one simple rule about money. And the strange part, the people who already know this rule almost never talk about it publicly, because once you understand it, you start making decisions that banks, lenders, and even some employers quietly hope you never make. Here's the crazy part. This rule doesn't require a huge salary. It doesn't require picking winning stocks. And it definitely doesn't require becoming some kind of financial genius. But if someone starts applying it in their 20s, it can completely change what their life looks like by the time they turn 40. And later in this video, I'm going to show you the one move most people in their 20s completely ignore. The same move that quietly separates the people who struggle with money for decades from the people who end up with 7 figures earlier than anyone expected. And trust me, most people only discover it when it's already too late. But before we get there are 3 things you need to understand first. First, there's a simple financial habit that can quietly add hundreds of thousands of dollars to your net worth, even if you never get a big raise. Second, there's a common mistake people in their 20s make that can cost them more than $500,000 over their lifetime, and they don't even realize it's happening. And third, the one almost nobody talks about, there's a timing advantage that only exists in your 20s, and once it's gone, you can never get it back. That third one is the difference between people who retire wealthy and people who work for the rest of their lives. But we're not opening that loop just yet. Disclaimer 130. Quick disclaimer before we dive in. Nothing in this video is financial advice. This is for educational purposes only. Always consult a licensed financial advisor before making any financial decisions. Now, let's get into it. Let me guess something about you. You probably know saving money is important. You've heard people talk about investing. You've seen videos about retirement accounts like a 401k or an IRA. But deep down, there's still this quiet voice in your head saying something like, I'll start when I make more money. I'll start after I pay off this debt. I'll start when life slows down. And in the meantime, life keeps moving. Rent gets paid, food gets bought, subscriptions stack up, months turn into years. And every once in a while you open your bank app, look at your balance, and feel that tiny wave of stress. Not panic, just that quiet thought, I should probably be doing something smarter with my money. But here's the truth most people never hear. If you feel behind financially in your 20s, it's not because you're irresponsible, it's because almost nobody teaches how wealth actually works. School teaches how to work, banks teach how to borrow, but almost nobody teaches how money grows. And that changes today, because the real problem isn't laziness, it's the system. Think about how the average person handles money. They keep most of it in a normal savings account at a big bank, maybe a checking account at Chase, maybe Bank of America. And that account might be paying something like 0.01% interest, which basically means your money is sitting there doing nothing. Meanwhile, inflation slowly eats away at its value. But here's the part that should bother you. That same bank takes your money and lends it out at much higher rates. Credit cards might charge 20% or more. Loans might charge 6% to 10%. So your money sits still while the bank uses it to generate profit. Over 10 years, the difference between money sitting in a low-interest account and money invested in a broad stock market index fund can easily be tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes much more. And this is where the first insight comes in. The real danger in your 20s isn't spending too much money. It's letting time pass without investing. Because time is the one asset that becomes more valuable than money itself. And that leads us to something most people never think about. But before we go deeper, I want to show you the real reason this video exists. Because everything so far was just the setup. There's a simple ladder many people use to slowly build wealth. And the first step is surprisingly small. Step 1 is just moving your emergency savings into a high-yield savings account. For example, some people choose something like Ally Bank or Marcus by Goldman Sachs. Setting this up usually takes about 15 minutes. Instead of earning almost nothing, that money may earn a few percent per year. It's not life-changing, but it builds momentum. Let me put that a different way. Your money finally starts working instead of sleeping. Now, step 2. This is where things get interesting. Many employers offer something called a 401k match, which means if you contribute part of your paycheck to a retirement account, your employer may match a portion of it. Imagine putting in $100 and your employer adding $100. That's an instant 100% return before the money is even invested. And here's why people find them powerful. Money placed into a Roth IRA grows over time, and qualified withdrawals later in life may be tax-free. But the key idea isn't taxes. The key idea is time. Someone contributing even a few $100s per month in their 20s can see dramatically different outcomes compared to someone who waits until their 30s. And that closes the second loop we opened earlier. Because the biggest mistake people make in their 20s isn't choosing the wrong investment, it's waiting to start. Now step 4. This is where the big unlock happens. Instead of trying to guess which company will explode in value, some people choose to invest in broad index funds, funds that track the entire market. These exist at companies like Vanguard, Fidelity, and Charles Schwab. The idea is simple. Instead of betting on one company, you own tiny pieces of hundreds of companies. It takes minutes to set up. And historically, over long periods, the overall market has grown as the economy grows. Imagine planting a tree. You don't dig it up every week to see if it's growing. You water it and let time do the work. And finally, step 5, automation. This is the multiplier. Some people choose to set up automatic transfers into their investment accounts every month. Maybe $100, maybe $300, maybe more. It happens quietly in the background. And suddenly, years later, they look up and realize something incredible happened. Now let me tell you a quick story. A guy named Daniel was 24. He worked a normal job, making about $55,000 a year. He had student loans, credit card debt, and almost no savings. One night, he checked his bank balance and realized something. 5 years had passed since college, and he had almost nothing to show for it. That was the moment everything changed. He opened a Roth IRA with Vanguard, set up an automatic $300 monthly contribution, and invested it into a broad index fund. The setup took less than 30 minutes. That was it. No day trading, no complicated strategies, just consistency. Years later, his account had grown far beyond what he originally expected. But the biggest change wasn't the number, it was the feeling. For the first time, he felt like his future wasn't something to worry about. It was something being built. And the difference between Daniel and most people wasn't intelligence. It wasn't income. It was simply knowing this one system earlier. Now I can already hear 3 objections forming. First, I don't make enough to invest. But here's the reality. Even $50 or $100 per month invested consistently can begin building the habit and momentum that compounds over time. Second, I'll start when I get a raise. But every year of delay means losing a full year of compounding growth. Time doesn't pause. And third, what if the market crashes? That fear is completely understandable. Markets do go down sometimes, but historically, over long time horizons, diversified investments have recovered and continued growing. And now we need to close the final loop we opened at the very beginning. Remember when I said there was one timing advantage in your 20s that disappears forever? Here it is. The real secret isn't how much money you invest, it's how early you start. Because compounding isn't linear, it's exponential, which means the dollars invested in your 20s often do more work than dollars invested decades later. One small investment early in life can quietly multiply many times over simply because it had time. And that single insight, used consistently, can be worth more than every complicated financial strategy combined. So here's the question I want to ask you. If you could go back to your 20-year-old self and give them one piece of money advice, what would it be? Write it in the comments. Because someone reading that advice might be exactly where you once were. And before you go, there's something fascinating about the way wealthy people structure their accounts that almost nobody talks about. Once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere. But remember this, building wealth isn't about making perfect decisions. It's about making one simple decision earlier than everyone else.